Our interview this morning is with Lloyd Sledge Roberts. Sledge was born in Newport, Rhode Island in April of 1950. He served in the United States Army. I'm sorry, Sledge. You served in the Army from dates
November 1967,
through.
April of 72.
Okay. His highest rank attained was E6, Staff Sergeant.
Yes.
This interview is conducted at Burleson, Texas on Thursday, September the 12th, 2013. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Sledge in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, who is our videographer, and Russell Barton, who is here as an observer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress in Washington, and also for Operation Remember in Burleson, Texas. And with that little introduction, Sledge, you can tell us about your time in the U.S. military, sir.
Well, I'd like to start with by making a correction. 72 was my first time in. I didn't get out until sometime in 1980. So I served 12 years total. So from 67 add forward, and that's when I got out.
Okay,
Just to set the record straight.
you bet.
I went to, I didn't finish high school, so I was 17 when I went in to be enlisted, and went in Rhode Island where I joined up at, but I've been living in South Carolina, which was Charleston, and I'll be daggum if they didn't send me to Fort Jackson, South Carolina to be inducted. So I'm right back there at home. I went to AIT, or basic I should say, at Fort Gordon, Georgia, Echo 3-1. And from there I went to AIT, which was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where I was supposed to be a heavy equipment mechanic. But with a name like Roberts, you fall at the end of the line. So when the line ran out of names, they switched me from the over to the operator's course, so I ended up being a bulldozer operator instead of a mechanic. That's the way things were done. From there, I was lucky. I was still young, so they sent me to Germany. And in Germany, I was in a unit which was a light equipment construction company. And we spent most of our time in a place called Grafenwehr, which was a rock quarry site. We supported all the other engineers in Germany. I wasn't getting nowhere fast. Been in about 8 months, and some slick boy come around and said, you know, you can sign up and go someplace else. And I said, can I go to Vietnam? He said, sure. So I signed the papers and re-enlisted and headed to Vietnam. Again, not having a care in the world, I reckon. Got to Vietnam, and I landed in a place called 84th Engineers in Quy Nhon, Vietnam, right outside of, came out of Cam Ranh. Went to this hooch and was staying there, and I kept asking the people, well, where am I going? Well, you're going to a place called land clearing. So I asked them, where's land clearing? And it was so bad, I guess, they had to get the chaplain to come over and talk to me. And the chaplain said, I need your dad's name and number. I need to write him a letter. I said, what do you got to write him a letter for? He said, because you're going to land clearing. I said, well, what is this land clearing thing I'm going to? Nobody happened to know. And he said, oh, well, they're out there in a place called Bang Sang, up there in the valley. I said, okay. Waited a week. A truck came in, a three-quarter truck, and the horn started blowing. Somebody hollered out, land clearing, anyway for land clearing. And I came out with my duffel bag and got on board and said, where's my gun? I need a gun. I'm in Vietnam and I'm in a war zone. He said, you don't get a gun till you get out there. I said, well, let's go. So we ran through the villages and got up this place, and all I saw was red clay and tanks everywhere. I think the 1st or 69th Armor, 173rd Airborne Brigade, they were running all over the place. And I said, my God, what is this? This is war. I said, okay, where's my gun? Sign in here, and I went to the tent and they gave me my gun. And of course, the first week, besides spending a lot of time in the outhouse, which is get your body acclimated to a new country called Vietnam in the water system, once you got over that, you were good to go. You were a veteran already. So I waited and got through that. And every night I would stay up because the guys on the perimeter would fire hand flares because they heard something. And I'd say, somebody's out there. Must be somebody out there. Why would they shoot a flare? They're just not shooting a flare because they want to. There's somebody there. So I stayed up every night. I didn't get no sleep for the first week. And the unit came in, and they just finished the job, and we moved into a place called Quy Nhon, where we stayed in Quy Nhon, and I was the new guy. Christmas was coming, so they decided to give them guys a 2-week break. So we left all the bulldozers outside in Quinyon, a place called Rock Valley, where we had the rock tigers, they call them, rock tigers from Korea. And they left. And they left 4 of us there to guard all 30 bulldozers. I'm new, I don't know better, so I'm staying there. But every night, the rocks would come out and they would guard the place for us. I said, well, that's not so bad. Christmas Day comes, lo and behold, here comes a helicopter with Santa Claus on it. He's flying in circles, I'm looking up, Santa, I'm hollering, Santa, just the 4 of us. And he comes down and he brings us enough food for the whole unit. Eggnog, mashed potatoes, ham, turkey, all in the migrate hand, in the mermaids. Well, we're the only guys here. Merry Christmas! So we had all the food for 80-something guys, and we just sat there and gave it to the Koreans and anything else we could do. So that was my start off of Vietnam in the land clearing outfits. And that's how we started from there. I spent 18 months in the land clearing outfits. The first 9 months, I had graduated from a tracer cutter, which is what somebody who goes and takes his dozer and marks the paths that they want all the people to put all the trees on. It's called a tracer cutter. You mark it, they'll push the trees and leave them there, and they'll move on. That's how we click the process. But I graduated, and after 9 months, you kind of get off the bulldozer a little bit. You start walking on the ground, marking the tracers, telling the guys where to go. So we do all that, and that was all real fine. And towards the end, I went down the side of a hill. This is where I got my injury. I rolled a bulldozer down the side of a hill, and side over side 2 or 3 times, and messed up the dozer and messed me up pretty bad. It wasn't about a week or so later that I went home on R&R or leave, because I extended to stay there. And if you extend, they let you go home for 30 days. So naturally, I went home, and I came back, and the first thing they told me was, you got to get on this bulldozer. I'm going, I'm not getting on any bulldozer. Company commander said, Roberts, what is your problem? You signed up for another, your deal was this. And I go, yes, sir, my deal was this, but my deal also was I was walking tracers. I wasn't operating a dozer at the time. He says, I don't know what we're going to do with you. I said, well, them guys in Como look pretty clean. Every time we come in, they're looking good and starched and all that stuff. We're all raggedy with dirt and dust. He says, well, then go on in there and see if you can do it. So I left the bulldozers, went into the Como bunker, and there was a PFC in there from the infantry. And he says, I'll show you all you need to know. I said, what about the Como guys? He said, well, your Como guys are going on R&R. So the same day I went in, our Como section left. And there was an infantry guy with a prick 25 on his back showing me how to operate our radios. Of course, the first thing I did was made a mistake. Some major had called and something was going wrong, and I answered the wrong way when I talked on the radio. And he got hostile. He jumped on it, and everybody out there could hear the Jeep radios of this major blasting me off. And I'm sitting there saying, what am I going to do? This guy's eating me alive, and the company commander's watching. What you going to do, Roberts? About that time, he finishes, do you understand, over? I said, negative. Would you say again? You came in broken, over? And the place roared. I mean, the commander said, you rathead, you messed him all up. And from then on, I was in Como, and I was a Como man till I left, which was later in 70, April of 70, I left. And from there, we went on to Fort Carson, Colorado for the remainder of my original 3-year tour, and got out. I was in the engineers in Fort Carson, and assigned in Como, but always in the engineers. Got out, went stateside, stayed out almost, 15 months, 18 months, and I went back in service. Joined back up, retained my rank as E5, and was sent to Germany. Germany, I did a 4.5-year tour. Germany, because they extended everybody, and I was married at the time now, and the wife got to stay. And I think that was the biggest tour was there, where they sent me back from Germany, where I was sent to Fort Stewart, Georgia, Camp Swampy. First time I'd ever been a Como chief, and they stuck me in the artillery. I knew all about engineers and engineer Como, but not about the artillery's Como. It was a complete different world. So I stayed there, obtained my ranks, and I got out, like I said, somewhere in 80, 81. That would have been my extent of my military service.
That's the story, huh?
That's what I'm sticking to.
Okay. you were born and you grew up in Newport.
Up till 13 years old, where I was transferred to my father. My mother and father was divorced. You know, young kids, 13, mamas can't handle them always. So I headed south to stay with my dad.
Went with Dad.
With Dad.
Okay. And you were inducted at Fort Jackson,
Fort Jackson.
North Columbia,
Right, South Carolina.
and then went to Fort Gordon for your basic.
Right.
How old were you when you went to basic?
See, I was still 17.
17 years old.
Let's see, 67. Yep, 17. I didn't turn 18 until April of 68. And that was November 67 that I went in. So it's right on the edge.
First time away from home by yourself, really?
Yes. I'd always been at home, one home or another. But yeah, always at home.
Was that pretty much a shock to you?
No. I fit in like a glove.
Okay.
They would sing to me at night. The guys, if a guy had a guitar, he'd make up a song about Roberts. He'd say, somebody, the one who's about when fools fall in love and things like that, and he'd always say, when a Roberts falls in love, and we'd all go crazy. What are you picking on me? There's 100 guys here. Why am I the one? They like me. I was skinny, rail, fast bouncer. When I walked, I bounced. I was in the 60s, they called it strutting. When you walk with a strut. You sort of a little lift when you walk. You didn't just walk, you strutted. And that Yankee brought out the strut in me, you know, and it sort of got me in a lot of trouble because the Southerners didn't understand the strut. That was like, where you come from, boy? So I got through that.
You were 12 weeks probably in basic?
12 weeks, yeah. I went through a Christmas. Got a week, you know, they give us a 2-week right in the middle of basic. That was a tough one. Because you're spending all this time, all of a sudden they break you up because Christmas and they all close. It's like, wow, you just got me acclimated to this program. Now you're sending me back home. But, you know.
And for Christmas you went back to
That's South
Charleston.
Carolina, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Walked up the driveway.
So you didn't have far to go.
No, didn't have far to go, which was pretty easy. But met my father in the driveway and he says, remember what I told you 3 years ago? I said, what's that? He said, you came in from that barber shop down there and you told that guy, that barber, convinced that he wanted to give you a butch haircut. And I told you then, is the only time I ever want to see you with a butch haircut is you in the military. And he said, yeah, I see. You got that butch haircut again. I'll always remember that, butch haircut.
You went up to Leonard Wood. You go to
Yes.
Leonard Wood in the summer or winter?
Winter. Been more like February, maybe. February, March, somewhere
You
there.
have a nice modern barracks up there, did you?
No, we had the 2-story wooden barracks.
A little
Yeah.
drafty?
A whole lot drafty. Oh, well, there was so much drafty, you had to have the windows open 4 inches at the bottom and 4 inches at the top for spinal meningitis. Everybody had to sleep head to toe, toe to head, double bunks, but the windows had to be open in the cold as it was to circulate the air. That was a procedure for that time.
Of course, if you grew up in Newport, the cold weather wasn't anything.
Not a problem. I love it. I can remember walking the streets at night and the wind blowing and snow blowing and mustaches had icicles on it. You didn't even bother. You just went with the flow.
I spent 16 weeks in Newport in one of those
Navy
two-story
thing.
wooden barracks.
Oh, yeah, okay.
A long time ago.
And you know what I'm talking about.
Leonard Wood, and you learned
How to operate a bulldozer.
a crawler operator?
A D7E Caterpillar bulldozer. Well, actually, I think we had D7Es and we had HD16s, which is the Alice Chamber version. And you had 2 different bulldozers. The Caterpillar was real responsive to whatever controls you used. If you pulled it back, the blade came up and you could make nice smooth cuts. But the HD16, which is international, it was slow on hydraulics, so you were outspeeding your blade. So you're trying to keep your blade up with the dirt. If you see a mistake, you thought you were correcting it by pulling your blade up, but you had to actually slow the dozer down because it wasn't fast enough. So it was really hard to operate the HD16. But the Caterpillar, that was the jewel, crown jewel, D7E.
So after Leonard Wood, I guess they put you on an airplane, sent you to the West Coast?
No, after Leonard Wood, I went to the East Coast.
East Coast.
Yes. Yeah. I went to Germany.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Were you single this
Yes.
time?
Yes, single.
When did you get married?
Huh. First time's not the charm. I don't remember.
Okay.
But I did.
When you went
I
to
think I was
Germany-
25, so let's put it together. 75? 65, 75, I don't know. I was 25. I remember that because I remembered it.
But when you went to Germany, you were single.
No, I was married
No.
when I went to Germany.
The first time, the 8-month tour.
No, the 8th time I was single. Single
Okay.
through Germany and Vietnam the first time, right? I was single, and I
Okay.
got out. I was still single, and I went back in. I was still single. And it was after I went back in that I got married.
Okay. So, you spent 8 months in Germany as a single guy. You were probably E3, E4,
E2.
E2.
Nobody made rank in Germany in the 60s. Nobody made. They promised me E3 if I re-enlisted. That's one of the reasons.
E2, you were making
Well,
80 or 90 bucks a month.
well, it was $60.45 in basic, so it's probably pretty close to 80 something dollars.
Now that $60, was that every 2 weeks? Or
That was a month.
That was a month.
That was a month. And I had money left over. I come from hard times. I know how to stretch my dollar. I would pull little tricks, if I could tell little tricks. When I would have spare time, because I've already polished my boots and cleaned my weapon and turn it in, and I'd take off, and I'd go get in the phone line up at basic training, and I'd stand in that phone line. The line would have, 10, 15 people in the phone line. And when I got up close to that line, I'd look around at the 15 guys behind me and say, anybody want to buy this spot? And somebody said, I'll give you 50 cents. I said, I'll take it. And I'd take that 50 cents, and I'd take off. 50 cents was a long way in 68, especially when you get back to the back of the line again. Nobody could complain because it was my position. Guys, they kind of didn't like it, but they couldn't say nothing because I maintained my position.
Wow.
So, and the guy in the back, he loved it. One guy, it got exciting. And I said, wow, they started bumping it to $1 because they were like, I'll give you 50 cents. I'll give you $1. The guy behind him, so it got better. So I always had money left over at the end of the month, which is amazing out of 60-something bucks to have change.
So while you were in Germany, though, you were a dozer operator over there.
Dozer operator,
Clearing
rock
overburden.
No,
or?
rock quarry. We worked in a rock
Okay.
quarry. We had a quarry up there. And we would push the big boulders from the top of the quarry down into the rock crusher site itself.
Okay.
Things like that nature. No overburden there. It was all rock.
You had all this experience on heavy equipment in
Yeah.
the U.S. military. When you got out in 1980
Or so.
or so,
Mm-hmm.
you ever used any of that experience?
Yes. Well, the first time after Vietnam, I used it. I worked at a place called Becker Sand and Gravel, and that's where we cleared overburden. And we
Okay.
take the top off so they could get to the sand and pump the sand with dredges and all, but we had to get the junk off the
South
top.
Carolina?
South Carolina. Yes.
Okay.
It was a sand company I worked for, and that didn't. That was a very boring job. It didn't last very long. I probably only worked 4 or 5 months. I think it was right after that I went back in. And I was like, this ain't getting it.
Okay. So after 8 months in Germany, you signed this dream sheet or whatever.
It's
and
called
just-
re-enlistment. Short re-enlistment. they
Short
call it.
re-enlistment?
Short re-enlistment.
You ever regret signing that piece of paper?
No, sirree, Bob. Not to this day.
Enjoyed all your time in the military.
The whole time, even though I was in Vietnam 18 months, that's why I was there 18 months. I don't think it had anything to do with the enjoyment. I think it had to do with the camaraderie. The land clearing unit is the kind of unit that you'd go to petrified. But when you got there and you got under everybody's wings, you'd give up your life for anybody there, would you? You got this camaraderie that you'd do anything for anybody, whatever they said, that was your new home right there. And you really felt that. There was no, we don't hang around that guy, you don't hang around that. We all hung together. We had a little competition, first, second, third platoon or something like that, but it was no real, we would stand in line at the mess hall, and when we'd dig a compound out of something, and we'd have a 2.5 truck that would serve as a mess hall, and we'd have the infantry around us, and they would secure us, and we'd be in chow line, and one of us would lay hold into one other guy, just got mad about something, and pow, and the infantry guy said, I don't know how you guys do that without getting killed, why don't they, that's just where we are, man, we're tight. You would fight, but you didn't always, but it would happen. But we were tight, real good organization.
These land clearing outfits, and you talked a little bit about marking where you were going to push all
Right.
this stuff down. You just pushed it in a big heap? You didn't burn it or anything?
No, we never burned. What we did was called wind rowing. Wind rowing is a process where we would go down a road. It was jungle on both sides, and we maybe 150 meters in depth or 75. I think our distance was 100 meters is all we could push a full load. And I think we would make a tracer cut here and another one 150 meters away. In the center was where it was going to pile everything. So we'd have two lines to cut from and drop it into the middle section, and we'd have all these windrows. And how they got rid of it later, I don't know. I heard defoliage was put on it, whatever, but we never burned it. So it was always just, you go down and see all these perfect rows.
So if you did this in a certain area, say in December, within 6 months, that jungle pretty much come back?
We had been known to go back to an area after it had already been cleared. It would just start regrowth. But a lot of it would turn into clearings where the farmers would start planting in the area and all that stuff. It was basically building interstate-wide roads over a 20-foot road. You had a 20-foot road going down through Vietnam, and we'd clear
You
both.
just pushed over the jungle, the trees, you
Cleared
got them
it
out of
flat.
the
Cleared
way.
it flat.
You didn't do finished grade
No
or,
finished
or
grade.
ballast or any of that
No,
stuff?
rough cut. Just tuck the trees down to nothing, shrubbery all into the pile. It was just, it looked like, it was rough looking. We didn't clean it up. We just took it down.
So then would another engineering group come in to build the
If
road?
they
or-
decided, I don't know of when they did, but if they did, the object of the game was to get the enemy 300 meters off the road on both sides. So if they wanted to set up an ambush, they couldn't come right up on the road and ambush a convoy. And most of the places we would clear were places that they predetermined, we need to run a convoy down this road. We need to resupply a place that's 30 miles from here. You guys got to open this road because we can't afford to try to run ambush convoys. So they had to ambush from 300 meters on both sides to get to us.
You
That was the
had
purpose.
30 bulldozers
30
in the
bulldozers,
unit?
30 D70s, on an average 25 a day were running and working on a daily basis. We cleared 300 acres a day on an
Okay,
average.
that was my question. So 300 acres, so you
10
cleared
acres a person.
a
give or take.
mile? Could you clear a
On-
mile a day?
Well, let's see. If I want to get it correct, make sure I'm right, I think we'd cut out a swatch maybe 12 miles. It could have been 12, could have been 6. I don't really. 6 might sound better. If we would move halfway on one side, we'd go out and clear that side. The next day, we'd clear the next side, and then the following day, we'd clear from the back, coming back in. So when we come back in this whole 4 days, 5 days while we're there, we'd end up back at our base camp, and then we'd pick up the base camp, and we'd head on down the road another 6 miles. We tried to set up in the middle sometimes, and sometimes
Okay.
we first start. You try to get within the distance so you had a pattern to come in. And sometimes we would stay there late. And there's nothing like a sight of 25 bulldozers going down the road at night, and all you see was the red glow of the exhaust
Stack.
pipe. Oh, pretty, pretty, pretty. But we'd all be going, paranoid, paranoid. And you never went forward. You always went backwards. Because if you went forward at 7 miles an hour, the dirt was coming into your eyes because you were running the tracks loose. But when you went backwards, you could sit up on the side of the seat rail and you just hold your clutches like this and just drive on, bumper to bumper to bumper. But there was always somebody in there who decided to slow down or stop. Now, everybody's doing 7 miles an hour, and all they had to do to stop would be step on the decelerator pedal, and the decelerator shut off the power to the drive portion. And then you would go, ooh, and everybody would be looking for the decelerator pedal because you fixed to go bam, 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 bam. Everybody just like a convoy of winches against the blade. Bam, bam. And if you were smart, you could get it down, you wouldn't hit nobody, but that would happen sometimes.
I guess. In this time that you're out there pushing over all these trees, clearing all this jungle, you ever have a time when Charlie just decides that, hey, these guys would be a good target?
I'm sure it happened many times, but it's very hard to hear if he's shooting at you, if you're on a bulldozer with running wide open. I mean, in my experiences personally, I've never had nobody shoot at me. I've had them come out and I've seen them. I knew they were there, but I never heard the rounds. Or I've seen cases where they would get on the back of bulldozers. I've seen, I don't remember what day it was or when it was, but this one Vietnamese had got up to the back of, I don't even remember whose dozer it was, and he was trying to penetrate the cage. It was a metal cage on there so you could see through it, and he was trying to penetrate the cage with an RPG round. So if anybody knows anything about RPG, it doesn't arm itself till a revolution of X amount of times, and he was so stupid he just thought he was going to poke that thing through and blow that operator up, and the operator had no clue that he was on the back of that dozer pushing on that thing. Now,
Wow.
he came off, and I don't know who did it. It was somebody knocked him. Somebody got him off the back. So much for that story. I went somewhere else, cleared some more trees. But yes, they would be in the woods.
You're operating in a jungle, humid,
Triple canopy.
snakes.
Oh yeah, bamboo vipers all over them. Stepping halves we call them, because a bamboo viper is a little green snake about that long. Called it a bamboo viper because that was its name. Stepping halves because that's about how far you got after he bit you. You get about a step and a half and you'd hit the ground. You were out. And one day I hit one. He was in a tree, and I didn't see him. A lot of vines and all. I'm going along, and here comes this viper. He falls out of the tree, and what does the dummy do? He wraps around my exhaust pipe. I had cooked viper right in front of me. He just crisped himself right there to it. I said, don't worry about him much. He could have landed anywhere, but he landed on the stack, and that was so much for that. And one time I can remember the man's name was Sergeant Steiger, Bill Steiger. Come walking up to me. I was doing the tracer markings at that time. I still had the M14, I believe it was, to be correct. And he walked up, and I took my M14. I did that thing that we call quick kill. Quick kill is when you throw something, you just aim at it. You don't ever take it and shoot it. You just aim the front of the weapon. He come up, and I went between his legs, and I fired off a round. And he looked at me, and he took his weapon, and he pointed at me. He was going to blow my head off. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. Look between your legs. There was a 6-foot snake there that was coming up between his legs and back, and I shot its head off. And all it had was a little bit of skin on his head. And he went, friends for life, friends for life. That's all I could say after that. And we were tight for a long time. He stayed around a long time.
What's the biggest snake you ever saw?
I saw I want to call it a python or one of them, because the Vietnamese were pulling out of a cut. We had already cut it down, and they had an APC, and they had a rope around it, and they were pulling it down the road. 25 feet, 30 feet, it was a monster. But they had it ripped up on.
Were they going to eat it or something?
I don't know what I imagine that's what they were going to do with it. They were going to eat it, but they had it tied to the APC. They weren't carrying it. They had it pulling it behind the APC. And I said, "Ooh, look at that big. Couldn't go to a python. I don't know, big, whatever. I'm not a snake expert.
You rolled a bulldozer, and this is a big machine.
Big, 44,000 pounds, a big machine.
And you rolled it
Sideways.
over side.
Well, we were working out of Bammy to it, and sometimes we couldn't get up a hill or down a hill. We'd turn around on the hill sometimes, and I turned on this one hill, and there was a lot of sand involved, and it just gave up on its downside. On the right side, it gave up, and when it did, it went over. So I went to the side, over on the top, and back to the other side again. And the reason I got hurt was because we have these 3 controls beside the seat, which are called pan controls. A bulldozer is designed to haul a pan in the back, and these are the hydraulic controls. So as we went over, I was fine. But when I came back down towards the seat, them 3 pan knobs are there. We all kept our little knob balls on it. We didn't just have that metal sticking up. That's a big thing, and I think I caught my ribs and something else in my back when I came back down on that. So that was my part hurt my back on.
Did you stay pretty much in the seat all the time while
Oh
this
no,
thing
I
was
went
going
on,
over?
I come right on out to see. That's it rolled. I went to the top, you know.
So you were just really bouncing around
bouncing
in the
around
cab.
the cab. Yeah, whatever. If you went
You
to
didn't have a seat belt? You
no
never.
no seat belt.
Were they equipped with seat belts?
I believe they might have had them. Yes, they had them.
But being
Well, wait a minute.
being a good operator, you never dreamed
never
of using
even
that.
never thought about needing no. If anything, you wanted to get out. You didn't want to be stuck in there. You wanted to. You only had a small path here and to the right and to the left. If something like a tree were to come down on you or a tree come in with you, you want to be able to get out of there. You don't want to be looking for some, because it would happen so fast you wouldn't know.
You mentioned the ROC, the South Korean
Koreans,
troops.
yes.
You have any exposure? You spend any time with those guys?
Sure. Yeah, we ate lunch and Christmas dinner together and all that. And I ate their kimchi, and they ate my mashed potatoes and my biscuit
Kimchi.
and everything else. Yeah, kimchi, or whatever they called it. They ate it. They had it. That's the true K ration, standing for Korea. I think the C ration, I don't know for sure. I don't know why they called it C.
Were they pretty tough cookies?
Very bad. Word was, don't mess with the Koreans. On the street and on the field.
What about South Vietnamese troops?
That ain't much care about them guys.
You ever work with them?
Yeah, they pulled security. Whenever we had South Vietnamese for security, all that meant was more work for us. Not only will we operate that bulldozer, we got up about 5 o'clock in the morning, got our chow, washed our faces, shaved, whatever we had to do, and got out. We were on the road between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, to go to the cut, waiting for the sun to come up. We wouldn't get in till 5 or 6 at night. And when we got back in, if you was unlucky to have a roam plow stinger blade, there's two type of blades. There's a bull blade, which is for finishing work, and a roam plow, which cut the trees. If you had one of them, you had to grind your blade. You had to put a sharp edge on it. It had a little go, no-go gauge. You took your air compressor out, and you got the grinders. So you had that to do. You had to blow out the dozer because it had all the dirt and the dust from the day, ready for the next day. So you're pretty close to 8:30 before you finished up and put it back in the hole. Now you got a 3-hour shift of guard duty because number one, you got Arvins, which means you got to watch the Arvins, even though the Arvins are supposed to be watching you. So somewhere we picked up.
So if you had those rock troops for security,
I never
you
had
felt
them.
a lot better.
I never had them except for the time I experienced. I stayed outside the rock. Yes, it was only 4 of us. We couldn't pull any duty, but they were all out there. Oh yeah, I wasn't worried about them. I go to sleep. I knew they were doing their thing. They were kind of dedicated to doing the mission.
You ever have U.S. troops for security?
Sure, we had the 1st 69th Armor. We had armor. We'd always have armor when we have U.S. troops. Never had infantry. We always had armor. A couple tanks, a couple APCs. Sometimes they would run with us for security in the bushes while we were, they were out there, we're cutting, and they're just staying out of the way.
Do you have any exposure to Vietnamese nationals, general population?
Yeah,
Go downtown?
Oh yeah, went to town. Learn a little bit of language. I can talk to them. Chako Manyoy, Lati Domakai. I know how to talk to them. I talk to them to this day. I love to get in an elevator with some Vietnamese people, and I just start talking, and they go, "Oh, you know this. Oh, you know that." And they're always young. I can't figure out. See, because Chao Ko is hello girl, younger woman, and Chao Ba is an older woman. So it's respect. And I don't know when I use the ba word if I'm tackling a young girl that she's an old lady. And they don't. So it's a little, not much, but a little bit. Yeah, I can't say I was there and I didn't learn anything. Learned how to count. Mot, hai, ba, nam. And you'll do that with the artillery. If you had the Arvin artillery, you always hear Mot, hai, ba. The gunman goes, you know it's counting 1, 2, 3. You always do that.
So you really enjoyed your 18
Well, I
months
was 18
there.
years old. I was 18 years old, coming to life, the real world. I'm in a real world of some sort. I guess it could be on a football team, but you got to play 24/7. Football team, you got to play, 3 hours or plus practice, but.
Back up, I thought
Okay.
of something here. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Sledge. This cutting blade
Mhm.
that you had on this bulldozer, that's just a matter of you put a sharp enough edge on that blade that it would cut the tree. It wasn't a hydraulic.
No. This blade was probably 12 feet in diameter. It had a point on the left, which was called a stinger. And the stinger had 2 little step-down edges at the points. It had 2 points on that edge. Then it had a sharp edge come back to stinger and all the way down the blade. In theory, what was supposed to happen, you would have come up to a tree, not stick the stinger in it, and just to the inside of the stinger, and the bulldozer was actually going to sweep to the left like a knife cutting.
Okay.
The power of the dozer was supposed to shear the tree off. But if the trees were too big, you took your stinger and you poked it in the tree and you started ripping the tree and you just kept backing up until you got that tree so it fell. So sometimes there'd be a lot of stumps left. Some trick that guys were doing nobody wants to admit was there'd be a stump. So we'd all remember the days of the circus. In the days of the circus, you had an elephant. Well, the elephant always would put his foot up on that stand and walk in a circle. We'll say, hell, we could do that with a bulldozer. So we'd take the bulldozer and get the track up, and we'd walk the dozer around in a circle. Don't quote this. But the new guys, they'd see an old guy do it, and they'd mess up. Because they'd get up there and they'd fall over on the side. We'd have to run in there and quickly pull them back up before the sergeant came in the woods and found him on his side. You didn't know how to do it.
How do you know what direction? I mean, these are big trees you're pushing over.
Oh, you pushed them that way. Trouble was,
did they always go that way?
most of the time, they'd go the way you push them.
You ever have one come back over on you?
No, I've had other guys push them on me. Well, I was pushing my tree this way, he was pushing his tree that way, and they'd be past that point where you're supposed to drop it, and if he's 80 foot or 100 foot, he's already passed, and he's still pushing, and you say, tree coming at me. Forget my tree, and I'd back up and move over or get out of the way, because he couldn't see.
Was your cage heavy enough to protect you?
On the outside, left, right, and back, nothing in the front. Front was wide open.
So-
Anything.
so-
I had one come in the front, so I know this for a fact. It
Wow.
come right in, came over the blade, came in so fast it blew my mind. I said, oh my God, how did this thing get in here without me seeing it? And the lucky thing was, you remember them pan controls I was telling you about?
Mm-hmm.
The base of that tree got so close to the in the cab that it hit them 3 pan controls and it pushed them to one side. And it loaded up the hydraulic system to a point that it killed the engine. And that's the only reason that tree didn't come any further, because my dozer had stopped.
Wow.
On my lap. And I literally came out and scarred my legs up, getting out from under it. Now it's in there still, so I started up, set up on the seat, put it in reverse, and it came on out. So it does come in there. You got to be careful. Bamboo was always your worst. Because bamboo, if you didn't cut it, it would bounce back up. And after we were through going this way, automatically we just went to reverse and started backing up. And if you weren't paying attention, the bamboo would come right through the sides of the tractor. It wasn't made to keep, because it had holes like that, good sized holes.
How big would bamboo get?
Oh, big. 20 feet, big, 30 feet.
Diameter? 12, 14 inches? Or?
Oh, no, they had big ones. They had 6 inches diameter, maybe even bigger. But mostly it was the little ones would get you, because they weren't cutting. As you went across with your blade, if you didn't cut it, it just bent over, which let it sit halfway up, and you backed up. It's like having a spear back behind you. So you had to really pay attention.
You have any people in NOM that you remember in particular, a non-com or company commander or somebody that was really outstanding?
Oh, sure. My platoon sergeant, he was the greatest. Darrell Barnett, I'll never forget him. The day as a matter of fact, he came to reunion about 2 or 3 years ago, and I called him up and I says, Barnett, who's this? I said, this is Sledge Roberts. He goes, I know a Sledge Roberts in South Carolina. His daddy was in the sign business. I said, yeah, that's me. And he didn't, and he was, he didn't forget me. And I always listened to him. He never told me no story. His famous thing was, oh, Roberts. He'd say it all the time. Oh, Roberts, and he'd shake his head. He wouldn't chew me out or nothing, but I knew he was saying, I'm looking out for you, boy. Now, be straight. I'll always remember him.
Okay, so you finished your tour in NOM, and you got out after you came back?
I went to Fort Carson.
Okay.
To finish up. I probably had 6, 7 months left on my
Okay.
my time duty, so I spent time in the B Company, 4th Infantry Division, engineers in Fort Carson. It was around Christmas, because we went to Pikes Peak, and we cut the trees down in Pikes Peak so they could have Christmas trees down at Fort Carson. So that was our job as engineers. We had to cut the trees down up there. But I didn't cut them because I was in commo. So I just had the tent, and I'd tell everybody, they're over there cutting trees. It's cold up here, but they're cutting trees.
The procedure, the radio telephone procedure,
Check.
other than your run-in with a major, you ever have any other?
Never had trouble. I got to be a stickler after a while with procedure. I'd like to give them hell if they started messing up, but I didn't jump on them because I knew if they didn't know what they were doing. The most they would do was at night when we'd have to call in sit rips. Now, a sit rip it's a situation report, and you'd call on the radios. Instead of us having a bunch of voice communications going on, I'd just call for a sit rip, and they would answer in unison a different sequence. And the way they would answer is they would break twice on their microphone. They'd push it twice, and I'd acknowledge that's A company, B company, whoever I could identify. And the part that used to make me mad was when I'd hear the same guy breaking for 3 other guys. They didn't realize that they had a signature, and I was listening. I was the only one that could. I knew that was B. That was 2nd platoon. That wasn't 3rd platoon. And he was answering for everybody else. Guys, wake up out there! I know you're sleeping. And 2nd platoon, who's on duty? I'm gonna come see you. And I'd run over to the track, and they go, "What are you doing here, Sledge?" I said, "What are you doing answering for everybody? I hear your damn squelch. I know it's you."
So when you see the movie where that guy says over and out, I guess you kind of cringe on that.
I hate it. You do not use the two terminologies, totally 2 different things. Over means I expect a reply back from you, and out means I'm done with you, don't talk to me. And we're finished here. That's out is what it means, out. Just like 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. No more conversation.
After Carson, you got out?
Got out after Carson.
Spent a year and a half, 2 years outside?
Back there trying to get a job, working in in sand pits and things like that. No other job. Never had another job.
And you were still single?
Still single.
Okay. Things outside were tough, so you re-upped?
Re-upped. It was a good job. Went back in. Oh, missed part of my tour. I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia, where I became a station of choice recruiter. this is a good little job. And what happened was I was standing outside of the company. I was in the transportation unit, 524 quartermaster call. You call, we haul, you all. We got some of the big motors that bow in the middle, go we had all the little rap going on. We answered the phone. But I'm standing there and I didn't have any clothes because I'd gained some weight. And I'm standing there, I didn't have a uniform. They didn't have it as a clothing supply. And I'm out there and I hear the first sergeant talking to the captain saying, now where are we going to find somebody who likes the military so much he can just go out there and talk about it? Sir, he goes, and who are you? I'm Specialist Roberts. I ain't got no clothes yet, but he says, you're my man. Next thing you know, I become a recruiter for a post. It's a local recruit. And where did they send me? Charleston, South Carolina. Went down there, hooked up with the recruiting team down there, and I was an individual separate from the recruiting firm, but I would set up buses to get the people on. I'd get guys from high school, motel rooms, wherever they were, and I'd get them on this bus, and we'd take them to Fort Eustis, Virginia from Charleston. And my pitch was stevedores, because Fort Eustis, Virginia was the Army's Navy, you might want to call it. They had stevedores. And in Charleston is a big port city. So that was a good ploy, telling you want to work at the port, it's the best way. Join the Army, become a stevedore, you got the references and preferences, and you come back. And I had them going like crazy. So they kept me out there, and I was doing good. And I said, baby, I can get married now. I got money coming in, I'm working good job. Get married, a month later, I come down on orders for Germany. Oh, Lord, this ain't going to be good. This ain't good. Things are rolling right along, and now, from this to that. And that's when I went back to Germany, and that's when I went back married.
You take the wife?
Took the wife. Took her 6 months to get there, but I got back there and got housing and all that stuff. That was during the time a 3-year tour became a 4-year tour because there was a budget crunch somewhere, quote, quote. If you bring in the family, you got to stay 4 years. We'll just change on you. So, yeah, did that. Had my first child over there.
You speak a little Vietnamese. Do
Yes.
you sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Kleiner, just a little, I can sprechen enough to stay out of trouble. Anfahrt, Eisfahrt, eating on, getting off, Was ist los mit du? That's a little bit what's the matter with you. The hoon is los, the dog is bad, whatever. Yeah, I can do a little bit of whatever it takes to get in trouble.
So what did you do in Germany?
Engineer, again, dozer operator. And then, I'm sorry, I lied. When I went back to Germany the second time, I was a commo chief.
Okay.
Assigned to the 78th Engineers. I'm still going with the engineers, but I'm a commo chief, per se. Signed to headquarters company. Didn't like it at all. Did not want to operate a bulldozer in Germany again. Heard word through the grapevine that Charlie Company didn't have a commo chief. So I went to Charlie Company and found the captain and said, sir, Sergeant Roberts here. I'm the best commo man you ever seen in your life. He says, you know commo? Yes, sir. I can show you something. He says, he went and talked to HHC and personnel said, we want him assigned to Charlie Company as commo chief. But he's a dozer operator. But he's got a secondary of commo. So I went to commo. 30 days later, I was getting awards. I was up front of the formation. They presenting me with commendations. I said, I ain't been here in a month. But yeah, but you took commo from here to there. And a long story short, I won every IG. IG's never had a gig on me. I could take care of any inspection, install all the radios, set up all the sites. And a story that was so funny was my uncle was stationed in Germany. And he came back and we were talking one day. And he says, I met a guy. He said he got assigned to C Company 78th Engineers. I said, really? He said, yeah. And he said, that was after you left. I said, yeah, I know. I was gone after. He says, yeah, but this guy knew you. He said, what? He said, yeah. He said, I walked into a section. I didn't have to do nothing. I don't know who the guy was before me, but he had it all squared away. And this was my uncle telling me about a guy who took my position. I thought it was such an honor. The story was great. I said, I love it. Only in the military you can get stories like this. Things like that can just happen.
Your commo, were
Commo.
you all voice or
Voice.
Did you, it was all
Voice.
everything
No,
you did?
no teletypes, no, just voice.
At
Strictly voice.
various frequencies dependent.
Yeah, you had your AM single sideband radios and you had your FM. Most of it was FM.
Okay.
Line of sight communication was my
Yeah.
greatest. But there was a time in Vietnam when we discussed a PRC 77. We had a movie. Somebody sent us a movie. We were going to show a movie out in the middle of the boonies. and I couldn't hear my radios from there, so I took a PRC 77 over there to the movies in the middle of this compound. I'm watching, and something squawked on there. Oh, they told me to call a dust off in, a medevac. So I calling the medevac from the PRC 77, and I couldn't get them. Dust off 34, I'm calling, can't get dust off. All of a sudden I get this is dust off, what's your call sign, over? And I give him my call sign. I said, Roger, I'm at Zulu Alpha 1198. I'm giving my Zulu Alpha location, which is the Vietnam grid. And he comes back and says, that's in South Vietnam. I said, what, are you kidding me? I know it's in South Vietnam. You know, we're so far from it. He goes, yeah, but we're in Okinawa, Japan. And I'm talking to a dust off in Okinawa, Japan on my PRC 77 radio, watching a movie. And they alerted play cool dust off, come in, which is, they were about 35 clicks away. They came in, and when they got close, I got them. That's called skip. And the ionosphere picked it up and took it all the way to Japan on my little backpack radio. So radios are kind of wild. I kind of like that moment.
Sledge, you were a pretty good spit and polish ground pounder, weren't you? You had the right attitude, and your bright work was bright. Gig line was straight.
Always. I didn't have no buff shoes though. Not in Nam, but I got whatever clean clothes I could get.
How come you got out?
I spent 12 years in the military.
Right.
And I was at the point in my life where my wife had decided she no longer, I came on orders to go back to Germany. And she said, I'm not going to Germany again. I said, oh man, you can't do this. This is 12 years. And she said, well, we'll just have to break this thing down. I go, oh. And I remember all the other GIs saying, you know, you get a divorce after about 12 years in the military. The judges, they kind of favor the women. So they like to give them your pension. They like to give them everything you got. I said, she gonna get anything? I ain't gonna have nothing. She gonna get it. So I got out and got a divorce. But I didn't get divorced till I got out. And that time I was on the GI Bill. So I was going to college, making up my shortages from high school because I didn't graduate from Harvard. But I do have 14 years of education. I have an associate degree in the arts. But I was doing this at the time. So when the judge came by and looked at me and goes, you ain't got nothing, you're going to school. I said, yes, sir, Your Honor.
Just
Life went on.
12 years, that's a logical question. How come you didn't? You got 12, why didn't you just go ahead and do the 20?
Well, that was the reason.
Okay.
That was a jeopardy line there. I had to make a decision call here, go or don't go.
Okay, sir. Well, thank you.
Okay. I hope that helped.
Unless you have something to add, good interview. You're animated.
That helps.
You tell a good story. We appreciate your time in the service. We appreciate
thank you.
taking the time today to come see us.
I go out of my way to welcome people home.